Yeah, she's gonna go to Shirkston. Yeah. I know. So they said they used to go, they've always gone to Shirkston, and so they'll just go back there.
Test 1 2, test 1 2, testing 1 2, testing 1 2 3 4.
direction, the approach that that I guess everybody's been kind of waiting for. So we have our consultants, Greg Bender and Will Thurman, WSP, here present for us to run through the presentation, and then we'll start into the questions. So on that, I will turn it over to Greg. And again, thanks, and we'll see you later.
Thanks a lot, Chris. And good, I think it's afternoon still. Good afternoon, everybody. Greg Bender from WSP. We also have Will Thurman from WSP. We've been retained by the town to help with the short-term rental study. For those of you who've been following through the process, this is really sort of the culmination of a lot of consultation and a lot of work with the aim to prepare recommendations for your review, for your input, as well as for consideration by council. So what we're aiming to do tonight is, again, just for those who haven't been following too closely, just to remind you where we are in the process, what we've been doing, and where we are to go from here. We're going to talk a bit about the options that formed part of the work to prepare the recommendations. All that was presented sort of February 1st at the last open house. And then the recommended approach. Again, what we've aimed to do is try to keep it fairly simple, and again, base it off of the input that we received, and one that I think would be, I guess in our opinion, a good approach for the town to consider. And then next steps, and then certainly have as much time as possible for questions and answers. And again, for those of you who haven't been involved through the process, what we've been retained to do is a land use study. So we've been retained to prepare sort of a recommended approach for the town to address short-term rentals through the lens of official land use planning. So really what that means is recommendations for the town to consider in their official plan and their zoning bylaw. An official plan is a long-term policy document. It really guides growth in the town and sort of at a high level identifies where certain uses could be directed or located. And the zoning bylaw is much more specific. It's right down to the property level and identifies a zone for, say, residential use, or commercial use, and industrial use, and so on. So currently the town has a short-term rental licensing bylaw, and that's what's been used to date to really guide and license short-term rentals. But there was a moratorium put in place until a study like this could be prepared, recommendations sort of considered by council, and then enacting that into the town's planning documents, the official plan and zoning bylaw. And again, so should council, at the next council meeting, should council authorize us to proceed based on the recommendations, they can also ask us to change some recommendations. What we would then do is prepare the official plan and zoning bylaw to enact them to ensure that the town has those requirements in their planning documents. Oh, and I just want to be clear that the process to prepare an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw have to follow a very strict process under the Planning Act. So there would be a statutory public meeting as well as another council meeting for consideration of those documents for approval. So it seems now that we're in the spring of 2023. We've been at this for a fairly long time now. We started in the fall of 2022 with sort of a whole lot of background work and a whole lot of meetings. We met with a number of stakeholders, including town departments, a community focus group. We had an open house. We met with members of council, both former and current, and then we prepared sort of a background summary report for consideration by the town. We took that and then sort of undertook workshops to help form sort of options, again, which we had back presented at an open house just like this back on February 1st of this year, and then prepared an options report, all of which is sort of what we're here to present tonight. Everything in the reports that I keep mentioning have all been sort of identified in the presentations. And my understanding is that those reports will be available very soon for review prior to going to council for consideration. So here we are as part of sort of the land use recommendations phase. We're sort of at the tail end of that. Once we have this open house, there's a bit of a short time to provide comments on the recommendations, and then we're going to go to council for, again, another opportunity to have this conversation with council and for consideration. Once we have authorization from council, we're going to go prepare the formal amendments, as I mentioned, to the official plan and zoning bylaw, and then we'll follow the statutory process under the Planning Act, which is a statutory public meeting, and then council meeting for consideration for adoption. So as I mentioned, we've heard from a lot of people, certainly a lot of people who participated at the open houses. We've heard from a lot of people through the community focus group, which was also a really good avenue to get very, very focused input on a number of the background materials to review the options, and certainly a lot of that input formed what we're here tonight to talk about, which is the recommendations. We also heard from town staff throughout the whole process. Obviously, we met with Niagara Regional Police to talk about what their experience is with short-term rentals. We met with platform representatives like Airbnb. We met with local business communities through focused meetings with them. We also met, obviously, with the general public and certainly, as I mentioned, prior and current members of council. So what we've heard a lot of positive and a lot of sort of concerns related to short-term rentals. I'm not going to read them all, but they certainly range from short-term rentals are important for the community. There's not enough hotels, and we need people to stay here should there be events or just places to visit. They need places to stay. They should be directed to appropriate areas. You know, they should be in commercial areas. They may be appropriate in other areas, but we have to talk about that. You know, certain residential areas, such as historical cottage areas like Crystal Beach, could be appropriate. And also some of the other sort of concerns that we've heard relate to noise, large parties, concentrations in particular areas having impacts on neighborhood character, and certainly certain STRs are not necessarily appropriate for sort of residential subdivisions or communities. So again, as I mentioned, the intent is just to go through at a high level the options that we presented on February 1st. There were, well, let's call them 4 options or 3 and a bit. The one option that we identified was to permit short-term rentals in specific zones in the zoning bylaw. Now, that would require some work to update the official plan, but certainly we would identify particular zones that the town can consider short-term rentals within, whether they be commercial zones or other zones like that. One of the other options was to establish an overlay, which is a visual way to show where short-term rentals could be permitted in the town. It is very similar to using a site, a particular zone, but it can be a bit more broad. The overlay and owner-occupied, which is just a combination where we could say within an overlay area they would be permitted as a use, and then owner-occupied is just another sort of option to consider where the owner is permanent in that particular dwelling and would be permitted as a short-term rental somewhere else in the town. And then the other option we were looking at was an overlay plus a separation distance, just to allow sort of a response to that concentration of short-term rentals in a particular area where if you had one short-term rental, there could be a separation distance imposed so that within, hypothetically, 120, 150, 200 separation distance, you couldn't have another short-term rental in that particular area. So what we did is we presented that on February 1st. And then what we certainly answered a lot of questions and continue to receive feedback, even as recent as the other day, even as recent as today, to talk and consider that feedback and into the formulation of the recommendations. So, and Will's going to go through this in a lot more detail. Just to provide a bit of an overview, what we're recommending is a combination of option 1, which is specific zones throughout the town, as well as owner-occupied short-term rentals. And this is a direct response to some short-term rentals in the town that have experienced large parties, and the perception that having the owner there all the time is more accountable for that particular short-term rental, and something that we're certainly going to talk a bit more about tonight. And again, the other one is using existing zones, and it provides a really clear approach to where short-term rentals would be permitted as a use and where they wouldn't. We felt that using an overlay would be a bit ambiguous, and depending on input received, it actually could impact the integrity of that overlay because you could chip away at it, and then it becomes not as consistent as the approach that we would recommend. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Will to go through the recommendations in detail. And then we can certainly talk about next steps and then open up for questions.
Thank you, Greg. So I'm just going to go through a few of the recommendations, which you may have already read through some of them on the handout that you are holding. And the first aspect of our recommendation is that we want it to align with the current licensing bylaw. The licensing bylaw that's currently in place in the town defines an STR as all or part of a dwelling unit subject to licensing by the town to provide sleeping accommodation for any period of 30 calendar days at a time or less in exchange for payment, but does not include any type of institutional dwellings, hotels, or other similar uses. So in order to be able to ensure that when we are doing land use regulations and policies, that we're talking about the same thing and that we are regulating the same thing as what's in the licensing bylaw, we recommend that we add two definitions for STRs in the official plan and zoning bylaw that reflects the definition used in the licensing bylaw. And in addition to that, one of those two definitions should specifically address STRs that are owner occupied. There'd be two definitions. One of them would be only permitted in certain areas, and then others would only be permitted where they are owner occupied. The second aspect of this is that we want to use the existing zone boundaries to determine where STRs would be permitted that are not explicitly owner occupied. And this comes from Ontario policy and previous decisions by the Ontario Land Tribunal, where they have determined that short-term rentals are to be considered an explicitly commercial use, and the zoning bylaw provides zones and boundaries that make it very easy to kind of determine where commercial uses are appropriate. And the OLT, the Ontario Land Tribunal, has also determined that in certain cases where it has historical context for vacation cottage rentals, they might also be appropriate in those areas. Since short-term rentals are contained in a dwelling unit as per the licensing bylaw, short-term rentals should be permitted in commercial areas that also permit dwelling units and in limited areas historically used for this purpose. So for our recommendations for the town's official plan and zoning bylaw, we recommend that STRs are permitted in commercial zones where dwelling units are also permitted. And these zones include the following zones, which you can see are illustrated on the back of the handout. So those would be commercial zones, local commercial, and then some commercial mixed-use zones, which would be the downtown areas of Ridgeway, Bridgeburg, Fort Erie, Stevensville. The second aspect of this is that we would permit STRs, short-term rentals, in the R2B zone, which is located exclusively in Crystal Beach, and which was created with the intent of recognizing the historical built form of the cottage community. So this is an area that we've heard repeatedly that has historically been used for cottage rentals, and it's something that we've seen in the current licensing and where they are located, that there's a large concentration of STRs currently in that area. And what we've heard that it's an more appropriate place to locate STRs. Now we want to, before we get to the next point, we want to give a little bit of clarity on how and what a home occupation is, because we've been talking about owner-occupied STRs, and the way that the official plan and the zoning bylaw discuss owner-occupied is by calling it a home occupancy, a home occupation. And in the Fort Erie zoning bylaw, a home occupation is defined as an occupation, trade, business, profession, or craft carried on as a secondary and incidental use within any dwelling unit and or accessory structure, which is carried out by the residents of the dwelling in which the home occupation is located and up to one employee and is subject to the limitations of another section of the bylaw. And generally in the zoning bylaw, home occupations are permitted throughout the town where there are residential uses. Similarly, the official plan defines a home occupation as a commercial enterprise permitted as an accessory use to a residential dwelling operated by a resident of the dwelling. Like many policies, the official plan provides a bit more of a general definition and policy basis for different uses. And it provides a bit more guidance on how the zoning bylaw should regulate these uses. The official plan prohibits home occupations explicitly that generate noise, odor, traffic, or visual impacts that have an adverse effect on adjacent properties. And additionally, the plan provides greater flexibility for home occupations in agricultural and rural areas in terms of size and type. So there's some desire in the official plan that home occupations in rural and agricultural areas should be a bit more, there should be a bit more flexibility in terms of permitting those uses in those areas. Kind of acknowledging that in those areas, the houses are probably further away from each other and that there might be a need to encourage a diverse array of uses in those areas. In the zoning bylaw, there are specific provisions and regulations for home occupations, and it requires that home occupations are clearly secondary to the main residential use. It requires that home occupations occupy no more than 25% of the total floor area of the residential use, and it is required that home occupations provide adequate parking, and it restricts the uses permitted as a home occupation. So those are the requirements for any home occupation in the town. And then in addition to those requirements, there are special provisions in the zoning bylaw for bed and breakfasts, which might be considered similar uses to a short-term rental. The key thing to note here is that bed and breakfasts in the zoning bylaw are considered a home occupation, and they have special provisions that regulate the use, and they give it an exemption from the 25% gross floor area requirement. So the 25% of the total area of the house, bed and breakfasts can occupy more of that space. So now that's a little bit of a background around how the town currently regulates home occupations. Our next recommendation is in consideration of where owner-occupied STRs should be permitted. So generally throughout our consultation and in our research, we've heard that owner-occupied STRs are generally seen to address most real and perceived issues with STRs, either through the owner being able to hold their guests accountable, or just being able to talk to someone who's there and feel like those issues can be addressed. And as I was just discussing, the town's zoning bylaw currently regulates home occupations, including bed and breakfasts, which have special provisions. So our recommendation here is to permit STRs throughout the town where the owner occupies the property on a full-time basis. We also recommend that we permit a maximum of one STR on a residential property as home occupation. And there's also an intent to implement or support the OMAFRA guidelines on permitted uses in agricultural areas. So agricultural areas, as was discussed in the previous slide, there should be more flexibility given to those uses, and we want to acknowledge that in STR uses as well. And here you can see that we've got a bit of a graphic that shows what that might mean for a dwelling. It could be sharing the same dwelling unit, but the intent is to generally permit STRs in a secondary unit on the same property, as long as the owner is a full-time occupant of that property. Yeah. Our next recommendation, in cases where the STR is not permitted, or where the STR, according to our recommendations, might not be aligned with the regulations, the zoning bylaw, an application to amend the zoning bylaw would be required, which would require council's approval. In these cases, official plan policies would provide guidance as to how applications could be considered, including but not limited to aspects such as parking, amenity space, landscaping, garbage, and entering into a site plan agreement. So in cases where STRs are not permitted, they can apply to have them be permitted, subject to some review by council. And our recommendation is to prepare official plan policies and detailed zoning regulations that provide guidance for permitting STRs for council's consideration. So we would recommend setting out guidance and policies that give an idea of how those exceptions should be made. And here is just a graphic showing where we are proposing through the zoning bylaw STRs would be permitted. And the zones that are highlighted here and on the back of your handout are areas where they would be permitted without the owner being the full-time resident. And in most other areas would be where an STR would be permitted as an owner-occupied STR. Again, this is just a bit more of an expanded view of Crystal Beach. And you can see that the R2B zone, which is the yellow area, mostly aligns with the inner part of Crystal Beach. And the other areas are all the core mixed use and commercial areas of the downtown. And again, this is on the back of your handout, but there's a fair amount of commercial areas in Fort Erie and Bridgeburg where we would recommend STRs be permitted. And similarly with Stevensville and Douglastown, though there's more areas where it would be permitted in Stevensville than Douglastown. But just provide a bit of a summary to summarize all the recommendations and a bit of the rationale. Existing zones provide a clear basis for defining areas where STRs may be permitted, such as commercial areas, which are already zoned in the bylaw. The R2B zone has historically been used to accommodate cottage rentals, and its original intent in the zoning bylaw was to recognize the cottage character. Permitting short-term rentals in owner-occupied dwellings generally resolves issues raised through consultation. So what we heard was that owner-occupied dwellings generally resolve some of the issues that are associated with STRs. And permitting STRs as a home occupation can support diverse STR uses in rural and agricultural areas while limiting STRs in residential areas. And part of the reason why an overlay is not recommended is because it would require additional rationale to determine which properties are included or excluded. And depending on input, the intent of the overlay could be eroded. So with the overlay, there's not a zoning boundary already in existence. We'd have to create a new boundary specifically for STRs. So for that, I'll pass it back to Greg to go through the next steps in this process.
Thanks, Will. I think I've covered this a couple of times already, but just to be clear, quite an aggressive schedule has been imposed on us from council. We certainly want to meet that. So as a result, we're asking for all written comments, sorry, on the recommendations to be received by April 25th. So we could have a look at them and consider them before moving forward to a council meeting. What we're aiming to do is present the recommendations, again, once we've received input, to council for consideration, and once they authorize that or any version of those recommendations, we'll prepare the formal amendments. Again, to follow the statutory process, we'll have the statutory public meeting, which is a formal meeting under the Planning Act, and then have those documents before council for consideration and approval. So with that, I'm very happy to open the floor for...
Hi everyone, thanks. Listen, what we're going to do is just quite simply have the microphone at the back here, and if you'd simply like to ask a question, just come up and line up if you so choose, and we'll try and answer questions. But you know, if you hear a question asked that you need the answer to, by all means, let someone else speak if you can. And I see we have a few going here already. So certainly, yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what time frame, like, okay, would we be getting short-term rental licenses this summer?
Okay, so what I can tell you about that is that there's a moratorium on place that was intending to to align with the study work to allow it to be completed. So the study work needs first an endorsement of council. That's not an approval under the Planning Act or put stuff in our OP or zoning bylaw. That has to be done. So the endorsement will hopefully happen, after we get, this is the recommendation. We're going to hear
Right.
from you for a week, and anything that might get changed will get formalized, and we'll take that to council and say, council, here's the consultants and staff's recommendation on short-term rentals. Council will endorse that. That's not an approval under the Planning Act. We won't have regulations in place to deal with. We won't have policies in place to deal with yet. Council at that meeting should say, council will do what they want to do, but let's just say in a perfect world, council goes, yes, this is fine, we like this. Then staff proceed with the formal amendments. That direction to staff will allow us then to put our documents. They have to have the specific words, the policy, section this, section that, regulation. All that stuff needs to be drafted as it will be inserted right into the documents. But that formal process has a timeline associated with it. 20-day periods, circulation periods. So we'll have to have those texts prepared after council endorses things. And then from there, it gets circulated to all the agencies that would be involved in a normal application for amendments and zoning bylaw amendments. And then that will go to a public meeting in front of council, and council will say, they'll hear from the public again in a formal setting. And if they then should move to make those or approve the amendments ultimately, that's to say, go back to that perfect world. If they approve them, there's a 20-day appeal period on these things. These things are running through the Section 34 and 17 of the Planning Act. So I don't have a crystal ball, but it's not going to be this year that I don't think that new license will be able to be issued unless something happens with the moratorium, which is not necessarily tied to the study officially. It's just complementing the decision-making process so that, decisions, they're hoping for the outcome of the study so that, that's about all I can tell you, sir. Hopefully that was helpful, but.
The answer you didn't give us a time.
The timing?
Timeline, if you advertise.
The timing of getting a license is dependent on the moratorium being lifted. That's all I can tell you there. And should that come off at some point between now and when we get an actual amendment and decision at a council officially is up to council. It's not up to staff.
Why can't the application portal just be open and applications start coming in?
Right.
Let's run this summer if we cannot.
Okay, so let's stick to the format here because we're not picking up some of the things you're saying for the people who are home and on YouTube. So you're welcome to get back up to the mic and say or ask these questions. I'm not being rude or anything. I want to make sure everybody hears what you have to say.
Sure, I'm Rob Hatton. I'm a recent home buyer in Crystal Beach, so part-time resident in Grimsby and full-time summer resident down here in Grimsby and full-time resident down here in Crystal Beach. I bought a place in Beechwood, and my situation proves the exception to the rule that I think this study is ill-defined, not properly thought out, and it's foot-dragging in my view. I have a property which is an amalgamation of 5 lots smashed together. There's 5 units on it, and by going by what your recommendation is, I can live in one, rent one out, and have 3 others sit vacant if I wish to do that. Now, I don't wish to be in the STR business, but I don't want the town to take away my opportunity to do that, and that's what this does. So this maximum of 1 is ill-defined. My units were built in 1939, so kind of predates a lot of stuff. So again, I'm the exception to the rule. But going to this gentleman's point, this needs to be open. People need to apply for all the various reasons we talked about. And again, I don't plan to be in the STR business. I plan to be in the LTR business, but not the STR. So I just feel that the view of the property owner having the ability to carry on the use of their own land, and you look at the map of Fort Erie, first of all, coming from Grimsby, I know what infill by developers is like when you don't use the land properly. When I view that map of Fort Erie and say, man, you know, like you didn't even allow stuff on Dubanow Road where all the cottages are and all those little infills. I just find that odd, and there's, I don't want to say there's an agenda behind it, but it just seems odd. You don't even pave the road there. But my view here, we didn't, and why, I'm a shareholder of WSP. You do great work on pipes and stuff like that. Short-term rental studies, not so much. There is no discussion tonight of fees. There is no data on any of the noise abatement and all the other issues that arose. And if it's there, I'd like to see it. Because I think you're judging, or you're basing your recommendations on a lot of hearsay and fallacy. So that's just my comment. But in my situation, I have a property built in 1939, 5 units on it. I'm spending a lot of money. I'm well into 7 digits. I'm so far underwater on this thing, I need Jacques Cousteau to give me a scuba tank. But I did that for a reason, because I enjoy this area, right? And I want it to stay. And the fundamental part is, I've been on ECDEV committees and given Dave Dodge counsel at Bank of Canada, like I know my stuff. But I think what you've done here is so short-sighted and so constrained, it doesn't allow the vitality of Crystal Beach to come back. And to say that, you know, this gentleman over here, when he says, what about just applying online? Well, we got to think about it. I think is not responsible to the residents of Fort Erie.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your comments. I just would want to say that fees are not part of a land use study. So there's no talk of fees on the land use side of things, but this, that's the licensing related stuff. So that falls under the licensing bylaw and the licensing provisions. Going to the topic of you know, filling out the applications, that's a comment you can make. And Economic Development Department, you know, on direction of council to queue up these things, you know, that's a recommendation. I would encourage you to make those comments. It's not stuff that we're doing or holding back, and there's no agenda to do anything that way. We're just trying to, where's the best place for short-term rentals, and that's where we're trying to pin on. But we have to consider all kinds of things, not just, you know, willy-nilly. There's case law out there that's calling these things commercial. We have to respect that, because if we go in a different direction, we're setting ourselves up to fail. That's you know, pretty.
Well, I don't agree, Chris, I don't agree with that really, because there's, you look at all the other jurisdictions around in different municipalities, they do that. They allow it in Grimsby, they allow it in cottage country. So this maximum of 1 building per, 1 STR per building, that's arbitrary and set by you guys. That isn't set by the government. And all I'm saying is, even if that was the case, I think this should be a made in Fort Erie solution, not a made in WSP solution where you've tried to find an agenda that is politically correct, because this thing has been foot dragged so long that it is not responsible to the homeowners and the property owners of this fair town. And I spent $1.5 million of my money to live here, to come to a town with the character it has, so that I can keep my place, my low-profile place on Beechwood, and a developer doesn't buy it. But put it this way, this gives me an incentive for my 200-foot of frontage to call in Molinaro and say, build, baby, build. And that's not why I came here. And that's what's going to happen if you do not provide flexibility to the owner-operators of people who are just trying to help offset their taxes. And for us to close the opportunity for 12-month rentals, I honestly, I just don't get it.
Okay, so
anyway, sorry.
I just maybe give me just make sure you get your comments in there. Make sure you get your address in there on your comments that you're going to submit to me. I do want to follow up with you on a couple of things, sir. Thanks.
Appreciate that.
Hi.
Hi, my name's Jennifer Bronstein. I have a cottage that's off of Dubanow Road, Point Dubanow Road, on Dubanow Hills Road. It sits on 7 acres, and it has 6 bedrooms in it. And I have owned it for 15 years. And I do not fit into the short-term rental because I have too many bedrooms. What I would like to make a recommendation is that for people like me, the only person paying the bills is me, is that when you have long-term rentals, and it's extremely expensive to rent your place, for anyone to afford to rent your place for 1 month, that it would be very good if you said you can only rent to one person once a month, but you can rent to that person 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, or 4 week. Because I have always rented that to help me afford the dune erosion problem, the wind, the trees, the things that just absolutely every year just go awry. So there's nothing stating anything other than there's no regulations on your long-term rental. And I think that we're hurt enough by being controlled about how we can rent, where we can rent. And it would be at least, since we can't get any more short-term rentals, if we have a long-term rental that we can rent for 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, or the 4 week, but to no other person within that month. Then you don't have the turnover that you're trying to avoid. And that's all I'm saying.
Okay, thanks, Robin. You'll put that in comments in writing to us? Yes. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Nancy Brock, and I live at 4261 Erie Road. I want to thank you for all the work that you've done on this, because I know there have been myriad voices and opinions, and I think you've been listening and trying to listen to all of them and balance all of them. I saw the presentation, and because we are in the residential, I can't see it from now, the Crystal Beach R2B zone.
The R2B zone is the yellow there.
Right. I am wondering if you could clarify the side of Erie Road which the extension goes from the town out to Rosewood Avenue, which is that way part on the west. What side of Erie Road does that cover?
The north side of Erie Road, I guess it's hard to explain that, but on the south side of Erie Road, all the way over from Ridgeway Road to where the park is, or the beach is. Beyond that is not in that. That's outside of the zone. That's the waterfront residential or zone, and that's not included. My recollection, waterfront zone isn't included in the permitted zones. It's commercial zones. Sorry? That's where we sawed it off. I mean, this is...
And excuse me, but I'm still speaking.
Yes, that's
so
right.
I am glad that that is not included. These are multi-generational properties for the most part that traditionally have not been rented. There's one there that before the last 5 years was rented traditionally, and it was owner occupied. Everyone else was multi-generational family homes. So I am very supportive of the fact that it is not part of the STR zone.
Okay, thank you. Comments? Certainly we'll welcome positive comments, just as well certainly receive negative comments. That's just the way it goes. So,
but you also said it was, as to your recollection, it was not, and I'd like to clarify.
What you're holding in your hand, if you didn't see WR on that list of zones that were
we're WR,
then,
okay, great.
Then that's there, but owner occupied in your areas would be.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay?
Got it.
So owner occupied homes
much better.
is
Thank
what
you.
we're talking about permitting throughout the town. It's just, let's call them dedicated short-term rentals that are just short-term rentals. Nobody lives there. They're just, each weekend there's somebody new in there. Those are what those zones identified on there. They would be permitted to operate as the dedicated short-term rental versus the owner-occupied short-term rental, which somebody lives there and they rent out the cubby or the,
We call them like the ma and pa rentals. Okay, got it.
And that's the one that they're referring to, whereas, one on the property. So where that comment came from. But thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
My name is John Loria.
I have two homes at 4337 Erie Road. I've occupied that property for 50 years, 51 years to be exact. I am disappointed with your land use study. As a result of this study, I believe that a majority of the lakefront properties, which are more and more now occupied by Canadian families, will be converted to short-term rentals by people who have a lot of money. Your plan does not indicate whether or not a given family can have more than one or two short-term rentals. At the present time, some of the most troublesome short-term rental properties in the Crystal Beach area are owned by one family who have gained or purchased for near $2 million another waterfront property, which they promptly turned into a short-term rental, even though there is a moratorium on short-term rentals and there's a moratorium on the licensing of short-term rentals, because they already have a couple licenses for short-term rentals. I am disappointed that you did not just declare certain zones off limits for short-term rentals.
That's, thanks, John, and we are doing that. That's what this study is ending up doing, and then, so those waterfront zones that you're talking about, what's being recommended is that short-term rentals are not a permitted use on those waterfront properties.
But the town has no enforcement policy.
What you're getting at then is the enforcement issue and illegal uses, short-term rental, which is always going to be, quite frankly,
in the past, I have rented one of my homes to a Canadian family for the past 7 or 8 years.
Yes.
Last year, they were reluctant to rent the property because of a next door short-term rental and all it implies. And we're in the area where short-term rentals are supposed to be forbidden. But people with money who own multiple short-term rentals, and let's be clear that short-term rentals are commercial operations, purchase those properties and turn them into short-term rentals, and the town does nothing about it.
Okay, John, thank you. You can just lay it down. I didn't want it to fall.
Hi, my name is Vivian. I live on Beechwood. I live kitty corner to a standalone Airbnb short-term rental. The owner's never there. They don't live there. They are running that strictly as a business. It's not zoned as, I find it hard to believe that I could just plop a business down in the middle of a subdivision and you're not going to corporately tax me. They're being taxed the same as any other person that has an STR. This has strictly been bought for the purpose of renting it out. It runs like a hotel. 2, 3, sometimes 4 times a week is the turnover. I can't believe that you allow that in a residential area. When we first purchased our cottage there, which now we're almost full-time residents there, there was maybe 2 houses on our block where they were the only people that lived there. Now it's probably 60 to 70% occupied by permanent residents. And there's a STL standing in the middle of our subdivision. And that gentleman on Beechwood there that has the 5 properties, I would much rather you allow him to rent all his 5 out, because he seems like he's going to be diligent. These people that rent that own the STR on our street do not care. It is strictly a business. They own several of them, and they kind of laugh in our face. It's unacceptable to have that in a residential area. And if you're going to have it in a residential area, tax it like a hotel.
Okay, thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Ujjwal. I've got a cottage property
on Point Dubanow and Baywoods. It is in a rural zone in Fort Erie near the Crystal Beach. So as such, as of 2021, there are about 15,000 homes available in Fort Erie. However, 99% of the tourists only want to stay in cottages/homes near the beach area or in the rural Fort Erie, which is again near the beach area. And so as such, most of the tourists only want to stay in the 0.2% of the properties which are available in Fort Erie. And as such, from this picture, I can see that you guys want to allow short-term rentals near the beach area on the properties that face the waterfront. But historically, the properties in the rural area which are near the beach, that is on Point Dubanow and Baywoods, those were also allowed short-term rental licenses because the homes are only built in cottage style. They are not built as four-season homes. And even on my lane, on my left, right, front, nobody stays there all 12 months. Those are simply occupied by people who can afford an additional home as a summertime residence. I know that a lot of people have a lot of things against investors, and they think that investors have millions of dollars in their bank. But there are investors like me who have their mortgaged doubled from $3,000 to about $6,000, and it's becoming very difficult for us to afford all these properties. So, first of all, I would like to understand why the rural zone near the beach area was not considered.
So thanks for your question. It is a very valid question, and one of the ones that I think we wrestled with significantly as to whether we include or not. And I think it came down to we didn't know where to start. We didn't know if you allow one area of the waterfront, why not the one beside that? Why not the one beside that? We felt that either without further clarification from council as to where we should be looking, it was very difficult to start. That's one of the reasons why we didn't include the overlay. Because as soon as you include one property, what about the one across the street? What about the one across that street? What about the one beside that one? It tends to be a very difficult exercise, which, to be honest, can have holes in it, and it's difficult to defend. Am I saying that omitting the entire waterfront is the absolutely, the best thing to do? No, but where do you start? And I can't just say this property here is a good one and this one's not, which is why we are recommending the opportunity for people who want to be included to submit a rezoning application. And I appreciate that is, yes, one extra step on top of all the other steps you have to go through, but it's a more controlled atmosphere than just opening up the entire waterfront, which, as we understand from our friends in the audience, could be very difficult from an enforcement standpoint as to where certain properties can be enforced. So that's why we're recommending what you see on the screen. So should you, sir, want to have your property included, anybody can submit an application to have the zoning bylaw amended to allow a short-term rental on your property, whether it's on the waterfront or whether it's on in any sort of particular area of the town.
And how?
So I can defer to the town on the actual cost. It's not free. And I would strongly recommend for the town to consider some other solution to allow it to be a little bit easier and cheaper and still require council approval for an amendment or for some sort of relief to have that considered. But because we only have so many mechanisms under the Planning Act to do this, that's why we're recommending a rezoning.
No, but then as such, there are not more than 300 to 400 homes near the beach that tourists actually want to stay in. Nobody wants to stay on Garrison Road or in actual residential areas. And and not everybody can afford a waterfront property or a property near the beach as a summertime residence property. Not everyone is that rich. So I don't understand why haven't you considered what has been allowed historically?
if historically the house was built as a cottage, how can it not be allowed short-term rental?
Because to be honest, like I said, we don't have that information available to us. If we had additional information and direction from the town to consider, and we had valid locations of these, it's not a cohesive approach. It's sort of a disparate sort of not a hole in the donut, but just a bunch of tacks on a map, which I would argue is not. It's not streamlined. It's not something that I can stand up and defend because it's just based on historic information or the desire to do it. So that's why having the opportunity to seek your own application through rezoning allows the ones who want it to do it.
But then, why are we not allowing as part of this study? We already had so many meetings. And I even gave written comments about why my area should be allowed as per your suggestions. And then this is the plan since day one, that all properties that are on waterfront should be allowed short-term rental.
That wasn't the plan from the start. The plan was to listen to everybody and consider all the feedback and provide recommendations based on our research, best practices. I can tell you with certainty that there's no municipality in Ontario, and I appreciate we want a Fort Erie approach. I appreciate that. And we've attempted to do that because I can tell you the work that we've done. We've never permitted short-term rentals and owner-occupied units across the municipality. We've never done that. But we felt that based on the input that we received, that this was in my opinion, and you can tell me, and I'm sure you will, that I might be incorrect, but it's a reasonable approach. But I can tell you that there are no studies that would recommend opening up the waterfront as a permitted use on all lands. It's too open and it's difficult to control, which is why we're suggesting that each individual can go through an exercise to apply.
Okay, thanks.
Just for the benefit of the group, it was asked that, because we are talking about an application for rezoning, what happens if a neighbor complains or somebody complains? It would be up to staff and council to provide their recommendation and for council to approve that. It's the same thing with somebody saying, I want to put a third story on my house. They'd have to go through a minor variance or rezoning. It would have to go through a committee or council for approval. Somebody complains, it has to be evaluated based on the merits of that application.
And this applies only when this becomes a law. Passed by council. Darren?
Sorry, before this becomes an open conversation, can we just have, I'm sorry, I just want to be respectful to the people that have been waiting.
Yeah, hi, my name is Rob, and just want to get a few things off my chest. Ever since this idea of banning short-term rentals was first entertained, a lot of people that I talk to that does short-term rentals, along with even small business owners of other businesses, have nothing but anxiety and stress. And a lot of times we feel that nobody, coming out of the COVID, where a lot of small businesses took a lot of financial damage, we feel like not many people have any empathy for our livelihoods. Like one example is the last mayor meeting regarding this topic. Some lady openly displayed her arrogance, saying, giving reasons why there should be no short-term rentals. She doesn't like to see a bunch of people. And today I hear absurdities. We're getting compared to these multi-millionaire foreign investors, as if we own multiple properties and renting out and owning multiple properties, and we're never there. We're there most of the time. We live in that. We're just fighting to struggle to get by. Before anybody likes to jump the gun on us for short-term rentals, we should still have more of a statistical review, just like a driver's license or insurance. They do a review on any driver. If he has a bad record, he's probably not going to get his driver's license or have a high insurance rate. It should be the same thing, rather than people jumping the gun on us and having that as an excuse. Oh, you can't rent out. You have to close your business. That's so heartless. And it's very inconsiderate. And then you get one person saying, oh, we should pay the same taxes as a hotel, a small business. It doesn't make any sense. There's no logic to that. Like hotels, if you want to go to Niagara Falls, they're mostly 10 stories high, 200 rooms, they're full-time commercial, they have people working around the clock for them, they have a restaurant, a bar, a gym, a swimming pool. They make more money. They have more customers coming in. And then we're being told we got to pay the same taxes. It doesn't make any sense. Like, what's next? If I'm selling my fruits and vegetables at a farmer's market, I got to pay the same taxes as a grocery store? I do appreciate, like, you know, like, if somebody doesn't like to have our short-term rentals and there's a problem, like, you know, like, we should try to meet more in the middle. Not just every solution is the worst case scenario, the worst punishment to family businesses, small businesses. It's always a solution for the people that don't like short-term rentals. It's always every solution to them has to be the worst case scenario, the worst punishment for short-term rental people. And they try to justify it by comparing us to these greedy people. Like, okay, let's see who's greedy. Let's see who's multimillionaire. Everybody I know that I talk to short-term rental people, they all have just one property. And they're there almost all the time anyways. And sometimes they just like to rent it out, and that's that. And I don't want anybody's short-term rental being banned, especially during these hard financial times. You know, everybody took a dent. Like, I don't wish that to my worst enemy. And there's talk about that. You know, especially the lady at the last mayor meeting. Oh, I don't like to see a bunch of people. And like, that's being considered that's like a pet peeve. And so that pet peeve comes off sometimes as more important than our livelihoods. It just doesn't make sense. What about our pet peeves then? You know, like my personal pet peeve is seeing Crystal Beach empty, ghostly, dull, boring, economically depressed, sad. That's my pet peeve. My pet peeve is seeing family businesses, small businesses fail. People being financially ruined. That's my pet peeve. And I'm hoping that my pet peeve is at least considered as important as some of these people's pet peeves that don't like short-term rentals. You know, should their pet peeves and disturbances be addressed? Of course they should. But it's not by punishing us to the full extent. We have to meet halfway. We have to come to a compromise. We have to talk. Some people are talking like there's never short-term rentals ever existed. Like you know, and I do appreciate how, after listening to your recommendations, like, I do see that change for the positive. Like, you are considering, you know, like, you know, more and more meeting halfway, and I do appreciate that. And yeah, like, it warms my heart when I see families spending quality time together, multiple families on vacation. You know, I don't think Crystal Beach should be this exception where short-term renters, because that's been at the beginning of time all around the world. I've traveled all around the world. I've traveled to multiple small-town tourist Canadian cities, and I love renting out Airbnbs in residential areas because I get to mingle with the locals. I get to experience the local community, and I made a lot of friends. And it warms my heart when I see families just enjoying themselves. I made a lot of friends. And it's heartwarming just seeing people enjoy their vacation, seeing people succeed financially. And, you know, it might bother some people, so let's talk, not totally eliminate everything else.
Thank you very much. I would ask that if there are particular comments that you can provide us in writing, we can consider them. And if there are any other areas that you think that we should consider, we can take a look at them.
Yes, thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Hi, my name's Sarah Randall. I'm a local realtor in town. I just wanted to share that I've sold many homes to buyers that were excited to open up short-term rentals in town. Unfortunately, they've had to sell them and not be a part of this town and move back, not even be able to stay here because there isn't any rentals for them to come to. It's unfortunate because we see so many local businesses pushing so hard, and people come to town and they don't have anywhere to stay. So I also have a friend that owns a restaurant in an arena, and people can't stay here and spend their money in our town because they have to go to Niagara Falls to stay. So they're coming to town to play hockey. They're going to Niagara Falls to spend all their money. So it's just very unfortunate. I agree with what he's saying, that it should be, a way that we could maybe come and meet in the middle. Maybe there's an application that you have to fill out. It's really unfortunate. I mean, I've bought one myself that I've poured my heart and soul into, and it's sitting empty because I can't rent it out now. And actually, HGTV was a part of it and came into town and renovated it, and it's sitting with the doors closed. And it's going to be on TV, really broadcasting and showcasing Crystal Beach, and it's unfortunate that it's going to be sitting empty because I can't rent it out. I can't get a license. So I just really hope that there's a way that we can come to an agreement where people are going to be able to apply. People are going to be able, the ones that pour their heart and souls in it and visit the guests and make a really good experience. Because I know if I'm going to a cottage country, I'm going to rent an Airbnb. I don't want to be in a hotel, and we really should be able to offer that to the people coming into this town also. So that's it.
Very much.
Hi, I'm Jason Kurtek. I'm also a realtor, also a developer. I built a couple properties in Crystal Beach with the sole purpose of turning them into Airbnbs. That being said, in the interim of building, the policy has changed, and it's a common feedback that I get that if Airbnbs were permitted or it was able to be licensed, that they would move a little quicker. So a little bit of feedback there. I think it's just taken far too long. We missed last season, we're missing this season as well, and I think we got to get something on the move. But one thing being a realtor, I own freehold property, fee simple land, the highest tenure of land excuse me, you can get, and with that comes the highest property rights that you can have. Other than that, you have leasehold rights. Property rights are set by the province, they're not set by a town. I think that this plan, even though I'm in an area where I will be permitted to Airbnb my properties, I think it's far too restrictive for the other residents. People are, they're at different phases in their life, whether they're starting out, mortgage rates are high, whether they're retiring. People do rely on that income. We have a tremendous amount of investors in town. We have just people, again, trying to pay their bills. Maybe you guys can tell me, how many hotels do we have in town? Right?
Two.
One or two, yeah. And I don't disagree with Sarah. People do leave this town to spend their money in Niagara Falls because there's no place to stay right now. Businesses suffer as a result of it, hockey tournaments, things of that sort. But I don't think it's the town's jurisdiction to over-limit and overstep the boundary of fee simple freehold rights on property. And I don't think it's really been an issue up until, in my opinion, this council came into play, and not throwing the council completely under the bus. I think we're making an issue and listening to a small minority, like, or a small percentage of the problem, opposed to the great success rate of successful short-term rentals. I do think that a better solution opposed to restricting what we do with our zoning would be to enforce more policing and more bylaw intervention opposed to restriction on owners' property rights.
Good evening. My name's Dan Silver. I wanted to be short and sweet, so I came here to tell you that I came tonight to hear your recommendations and to listen to the quality of your reasoning. I heard your recommendations, I heard no reasoning, and therefore there's no way for me to really assess whether your recommendations are good or bad. So it seems you're asking us to trust you without substantiating your reasoning. And frankly, that insults my intelligence.
particular question?
Yeah. Can you substantiate your reasoning for these recommendations? We came here tonight on our own time. I mean, I had to leave work early to come here. I don't see any reasoning. Where is it?
He's looking for data. There's no data.
Like statistics?
Not statistics, I'm looking for reasoning. You say you spoke to the police board, you spoke to a number of other people. I mean, I trust the democratic process, but I don't see that happening here. I don't see the sharing of good information. You could win my approval on this as a short-term rental operator, but you haven't even made an effort. Where's the reasoning? How can we assess whether this is good or bad?
So the intent is for us to present you with the rationale. We had attempted to do that. If there's holes with that, then let's talk about it. It's based off of all the feedback we received to date on the project, as well as our best practices work, where short-term rentals have been assessed in other municipalities in Ontario.
So we're being asked to trust something that we haven't seen any substantial detail on.
Fair enough. In terms of the reports, I can certainly defer to the town as to where those reports are and when they'll be posted, but that's a fair comment.
Okay, so we have to wait for them to be posted, and the deadline for making comments is a week from today, or yesterday.
Hi, Dan. No, that's not the case. What we're looking for are your comments on what's proposed. Now, the reports, there was 3 parts to that. There's the background work, there was the options report. Those were presented at the public information open houses that we've had previously. As soon as we hear from the public on whether or not there's holes in this approach that's being recommended with the existing zoning that's in place, the commercial use and the proven commercial nature of short-term rentals as adjudicated by the Ontario Land Tribunal. Those are the kinds of things we can't just simply toss to the side, because we have to have those considered. And so what we are and where we're at is that short-term rentals would be a permitted use in the zones that permit dwelling units that are commercial zones. So C2, C1, or C1, all those, there's a handful that you wouldn't have them in, like, automotive type things. But that rationale is there because everything we've heard that sort of framing it as, yeah, that's a commercial use. I hear it constantly, and we've heard it lots of times that, oh, no, it's a commercial use. So we have to respect that. But what we're asking is that these locations on the mapping are our commercial use zones in Fort Erie, and if we move forward with a recommendation to provide what everybody's calling a commercial use in those commercial zones, what's the problem? That's where they fit. That's what we're hearing, that's what we're seeing in other locations. But we're also saying, listen, this isn't quite exactly right. Crystal Beach has a long cottage history, particularly around where the amusement park was. And that R2B zone, which is quite extensive throughout Crystal Beach, the town is saying, okay, we'll buck the trend of it being a commercial use per se, but because we recognize R2B has been used for cottaging for almost a century or more. So I think we're going to push it into that area. Anybody else? Those are clear lines to be drawn where they be permitted. The owner-occupied, everybody has a sense that the owners are going to police those themselves. They don't want, to offend their neighbors. They don't want to have drastic parties. I don't want to say they will police themselves per se, but I'm just saying that that's the least of the problems of a short-term rental operation appears to be those owner-occupied are not the problems that we're hearing. And then if anybody really wants to get at it, they can apply through a zoning bylaw amendment to council and say, listen, I want a short-term rental in the middle of Crescent Park for whatever reason. They can make their case. They can pitch that, and council will make a decision on that.
Right, and well, thank you for that, but it still doesn't address that we all came here tonight to hear some comprehensive reasoning as to how these recommendations came about, and what we've been quoted, and this isn't, don't take it personally, but sorry for the cliche. But didn't hear it. I didn't hear it, so I'll leave you with that.
Okay, well, listen, there was a bit more to your question, Dan, and that was just like the reporting. Those reports will be put, like the background report, the options discussion paper, and the recommendation will all come together as one report, and we'll make sure that that report's out well in advance of the council meeting. I'm just trying to think. I'm a little bit wary about pinning a date down because it's always interrupted.
It seems like the council meeting is next week, isn't it?
No. Don't be confused. I want comments by next week, and those comments, WSP will take everything in that they hear and people have submitted and say, okay, you know, what we heard, are we on the mark? Do we need to make tweaks to this, and what those tweaks will be? That will be rolled into their final report to council, and that report is going to be the last piece of, let's call it the trilogy of study work, the background work, the options assessment and the recommendation. It'll be packaged up, it'll be put on the town's website. Let's talk Fort Erie or whatever locations we can get it posted. And that will be in advance, well in advance of reaching a council meeting, so that everybody in the community can have time to assess that. It's not going to be, like last minute, oh, here we go, and then a council meeting. That's not going to happen.
So what I would ask is, like when I purchase a very complicated insurance policy, legislation says that I should have plain language explanation, not the complicated legalese. That's what would be nice for us to have in the end. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Dan. I hope it is.
One thing you just said.
We just have a lineup here, and we've had your discussion, but please, stick around, we'll talk.
Hi, my name is Amanda Marshall, and I
Amanda.
just wanted to ask a question, I guess my concern in regards to, you made a statement that, you looked at the waterfront, residential, waterfront, rural, and you decided you didn't know where to start and where it would end, so you didn't bother putting it on there. So I am really concerned about that. People come to Fort Erie as a visitor, a vacationer, a guest. They come here to be near the water, near the beach. And so in terms of just regarding that altogether and just asking people to submit an application potentially to have it looked at on an individual basis for rezoning, I think is very short-sighted. Also, in terms of the number, one of your statements or one of the reasons why you were looking at this in the first place was, that you didn't want things congregated in a certain area. What you've just done that by putting stuff in Crystal Beach alone. So I know that you're not part of the licensing bylaw. However, with a maximum number of licenses, if you were concentrating in that, then I don't, even though we manage short-term rental properties, I don't think I would want 300 of them in Crystal Beach. That would be really, really awful for some of the people living next door, especially when some of the concerns that you're saying that people bring up, which we hear all the time, noise, garbage, and parking, that's just going to make it even more challenging for people in the area, especially in the summer. Short-term rentals are used for many reasons and not just for vacation. And I think it's really important that we identify the fact that people are moving into this area and they need to stay places. We need guests here. We need vacationers to support our businesses. We don't have a lot of industrial lands being used here. We don't have a lot of businesses. We survive on tourism. And so we need to have these people come here and they need somewhere to stay. And we don't have enough hotels to accommodate that. Nobody has, I don't see any data, just like Dan was saying, there's no data in regards to how many beds we need to be able to sustain the tourism that we need in this area. So until we have that, I don't understand how we can put this before council and say that this is what is recommended, because we don't have the data about how many tourists that we need here to sustain all of our restaurants and shops.
Wow, she really set me up as a local retailer, so. Just to share a story, actually just today rented a short-term rental in Denver. My wife and I are traveling there for a business trip. And we thought it'd be nice to get out and explore the local area. And we got this gorgeous little spot, in a mountain community, and really excited to go there. I'm a believer in those things. When we traveled to Europe, to France, to England. We didn't stay in any hotels. We wanted to experience the local culture. And we tell those stories to people about how much we loved that place. Do you remember we were in Paris, that little place right downtown, and the owner had a property right across the street from us, and he told us where to buy groceries and to eat and to experience that culture, right? Leslie and I moved here. We bought a house here. We moved our business here. We have a retail store in Crystal Beach. And I can tell you that a short-term rental saved us. Like, we needed a place to go through that transition when we were looking for our property. And if it wasn't for one of these awesome short-term rental owners that helped us during that time to make sure we had a place where we got the business set up and running, we couldn't have done it, period, right? So as the business owners, and as the last comment that you heard, we don't even know what the potential of this area is yet for growth for our business, right? We do rely on people that come and visit this beautiful place. It's beautiful because of the beach. It's beautiful because of the old town downtown, which is being revived. It's beautiful because of the fishing that people can experience in Fort Erie, right? That I think that what I've seen here today, although it is the simple way to do it, I'm not sure if it's the right way to do it. And I think that's one thing, we're putting the cart before the horse. Let's look at the numbers for what we expect to see for growth in this area, what kind of a community we actually want to be when it comes to the new businesses and stuff that help us grow into the next 10 or 15 years. So that's my comment, and I will, formally put something in just about maybe, holding off a little bit until we have more about what kind of community do we want to be and how much will short-term rentals help. And I would argue they're going to help tremendously. If we restrict it too much, we restrict our future.
Hello, everyone. We said we'd cut it off at 6:30, so if our commenters wouldn't mind kind of getting through their questions, we'll try and get to the answers. But 6:30, we are going to cut it off.
Okay, great. I'm Anthony DiSanzo. I have property on Point Avenue Road. I wasn't going to bring up what I do for a living, but I'm Niagara's largest hotelier, owner of Casino Niagara, and the largest hospitality family in Niagara Falls. I wasn't going to bring that up, but because it's been brought up numerous times. So here's a couple issues I have. It seems like the whole study right from the beginning is being suppressed. I don't know why, but it doesn't seem like it's being embraced. It seems like it's a swear word to create this pie that everybody is fighting for. If Fort Erie is open for business, if they're open for expansion, which will lead to new residents showing up, if there's lots of ancillary products around it, we will attract a lot of long-term people as well. So in saying that, the STR business, we are constantly competing. In Niagara Falls, you would think as the biggest hotelier, I'd be against them. I'm not. You have to create the pie first before we can split it up. And as all you know, we've been brought up in an era where you would ever think you'd jump into somebody's car as Uber. We were told never to go in somebody's car. Sleep in somebody's house, groceries being delivered to your house. It's here to stay. We had this challenge in Niagara Falls years ago. It's here to stay. It's very competitive out there. So we have to make sure if Fort Erie and this council, hopefully listening, including the mayor, is open for business, then this study that came out, seems to me, has come out how to suppress the negative, not the positive. My next question to you guys as consultants, because I do a lot of consultants with the government, OLG, Alcohol Gaming Commission. Have you been influenced at all in your decision on why waterfront has not been put into this by any councillor or politician?
I would have to respond no to that. I mean,
okay.
We're talking about the OLT.
Waterfront.
The OLT has said this is a commercial use.
Right.
Okay, so the commercial use in commercial zones.
Okay.
Okay.
So you as consultants, Wasaga Beach.
I'm a staffer.
Okay, oh, sorry. So as consultants, can you guys, Wasaga Beach, all waterfront. Niagara Falls, all waterfront. So I have a problem when the number one reason why people come to Crystal Beach is for what? Is the waterfront. And if you want to rely on OLT, what does it say on OLT? What's the definition? Historically rented units in the past, correct? Can you read the definition for me? The very bottom line, it says, in limited areas historically used for this purpose. So I don't know as consultants how you guys can honestly sit there and say, oh, we didn't want to open up this can of worms, when waterfront is, as far as I'm concerned, the number one reason why people are coming to Crystal Beach. For you guys to say that, oh, we didn't want to open up that can of worms is very disappointing. Because you go to Muskoka, every waterfront is. Why do you go to Muskoka? So you can't tell me that you haven't had some influence from someone that have said, with a stroke of a pen, you will not look at any waterfront all across Fort Erie, but you'll put them in Garrison Road in Fort Erie? Like, no disrespect to that? All of a sudden, you'll add a sector out there on Garrison in the QEW, and you'll take away the number one historically. So technically, you guys are signatory to OLT. So what's your definition of historical? All waterfront has been historical. I'm only the second owner of my property, and my previous people have been renting it for 1 week rentals to all their friends for the last 30, 40 years. So I have a real difficult when you guys look and say, we didn't want to open up where to start. It's very simple. Waterfront in. That's it. Very, very simple. Historically, you're going to have a tough time fighting that. And the reason why you want us to go individually, because it's going to go to council, and you're going to make us do all this work, and it's going to get defeated. And I'm going to tell you why it's going to get defeated, because I can tell by the tone of this whole study and who's paying you guys. There's no way you can honestly look me in the face when there's Muskoka, Wasaga, Niagara Falls, and everybody. That's the very first zone that not one public person complains about, because that's why everybody's coming. So I have a very difficult understanding that you guys are not even looking at that, or your best excuse is, we don't know when to start or when to stop or open some can of worms. But like I said, you'll go ahead and do Garrison Road. So I'd like you to answer that, please.
So Garrison Road is commercial. As we've said, we need to classify STRs as commercial. So they go in commercial zones where residential units are permitted. That's the answer to that one question. Wasaga Beach does not permit short-term rentals along the waterfront as a permitted use. They don't.
I went to there last year, so.
What? There are certain properties that would be allowed, sure, but it's not a full open waterfront. Every property can be a short-term rental. So, as I said, it's.
But there are options, correct?
What's that?
You can rent waterfront at Wasaga.
Well, there are licensed properties in Fort Erie now that you can rent on the waterfront.
On waterfront right now?
Yeah.
But you're proposing no.
Those are existing licenses.
That's not what we're talking, yeah. These are historically, yeah. The question is, listen, just let's cut to the chase. Why did you take out all waterfront?
Because, as I said, what properties do we include?
Waterfront. Waterfront zoning. Why do people come, like, if we're open for business, isn't that why people come? That's like me in my Fallsview room, my hotels, not having Fallsview. The number one reason why people come to Niagara Falls is for the falls. The number one reason why people come down here is for the beach and the lake. And also, people that are coming and renting their lakefront properties have a little more, affluential, they spend more money as well. Okay, they're not, and I'm not knocking the Crystal Beach. We have to have, just like Niagara Falls, you have to have every tier, entry level, mid-level, high-end level. So those waterfront properties, and most of them that are buying them, contrary to, I know people are commenting, Canadians are moving in. Never heard that in my own country, but felt kind of weird. So, we are living in our country, and the other thing is, that's not touched on, is all these STR people that are buying them, they're improving these properties. I'm not knocking my American friend for saying Canadians are coming in. Yeah, we're also coming in and buying properties that have been in generations that are dilapidated. We're coming in, we're spending, and we're fixing it. We're not coming in free, handed down. We're coming in at 1.5 million or more, and we're going in and putting another $500,000 in. And that helps every other neighbor that doesn't want them. It improves everybody's property value. And then also, so me specifically now, if I can, I didn't want to talk about that stuff, but specifically now my property is 4 acres and I have 4 homes on it. 4 acres in the proposed Crystal Beach area you're talking about is 32 SDRs you're allowing in 4 acres. 32 licenses within a 4 acres is what my properties equal. I've got 4. So like the gentleman earlier, I pay my taxes based on 4. I should not. It's actually illegal to say that I can do it and my neighbor can and I can't. So I'm paying property taxes based on 4. I'm legal, whether I'm legal non-conforming or legal conforming, I should still have those rights based on what my assessment is and impact addresses. I've got 4 properties. Then you shouldn't be able to carve out and just say pick 1, 2, 1, 2. Because over 4 homes on 4 acres is a lot better than 32 homes on 4 acres. Thank you.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Real quick, Robin Bannerman, have a business in Crystal Beach, downtown Crystal Beach on Erie Road, Crystal Ball Cafe, and we live above it. I'm very much to Dan's points. I just think that the data is missing. When you cite things like the NRP and bylaw, I feel that this whole kind of scenario has been managed by exception base only. Erroneous things like 3-bedroom limitation, only 12 people. I mean, I get to see in my small 5 years of business, multi-generational families coming to our community to spend time with the grandparents, parents, and children, to spend money in our community, to spend money at the small businesses, to walk about. So that for me is like, why are we not citing things like the NRP was called 50 times to the immediate area of Crystal Beach, or that there was 1 repeat offender or whatever. I don't want all the specifics, but I think those are data points that we really do require to make informed decisions about people's livelihood, and when limiting their ability to have a livelihood by eliminating their rentals. And when one person's complaining and it's the squeakiest wheel on the planet, that's not fair to all concerned.
Very quickly, thank you for hearing me regarding agricultural land and the home-based business, because I think I brought that up at the first meeting, so thank you for that. Timeline is my biggest issue. I've been waiting since before COVID, now last May, and now again, and I don't think I can wait another season. So I tried to list my property for a rate that I thought would bring in a hotel, but I was told over and over by commercial owners that, or commercial business investors, that this town is only a 3-month town. So in order to maintain a business for Phil at Philco or other businesses like that, we need to have business here. We need to have people coming to the beach. And I want to say again, I feel blessed and so lucky because as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Crystal Beach was rated out of 12 best beaches in the world. Wasn't that something printed recently? Because if that's the case, why would we not want to share this beach with anyone who wanted to pay money and come here and stay? And my point is, what is the benefit for not being able to rent on the beach, to enjoy the beach? What is the benefit of not being able to do that? As a teacher, we always ask, why do we make decisions? What is the benefit of not doing something? So that I want to leave you with that. The other thing is, we need people, obviously, to stay here to run those businesses, like Robin's business and all those other restaurants on the main street. And I feel sad for them when they basically close in the winter months. There's like no one in those businesses. It's crazy. And also, I want statistics and data too, because I don't know, is Phil full? Is he 100% capacity? I've got 4plex on Erie Road, and I'm not sure if I'm understanding this correct. Am I only allowed to rent 1 unit? As it's a commercial building, so does that mean 1 unit or all 4?
So just to respond to that, in a commercial use, you can rent as many units as you have.
Okay, so I've been waiting So I've been waiting because the timeline is my biggest issue right now because you should do this right and take your time, given all the comments. But you should grandfather clause all the people that have already been running commercial businesses before COVID. We've waited 4 years. And I know some people, got in there and yeehaw, they were one of the 250 or whatever to get their license. But the rest of us, it's discrimination. And it's financial discrimination. There's many types of discrimination. That's one of them. The other thing is, according to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, I'm allowed to make money on my property, and it's commercial. So why I'm waiting for a study really is not legal. And I've been really patiently waiting, and I've been really trying to be pleasant about this, but it's really not legal. And there's a lot of people here that are upset, and what if they do a class action lawsuit or something? I don't know what's going to happen. How long are we going to do this? Because I think that council is going to want to look at all this and the stats and the data, and they're going to say, we need to look at this more, and we need to do, and then we're going to sit around and wait for another season, and our guests, I have the same guests from when I bought the building, and they email me every year, Laura, are you open yet? Are you open yet? Are you open yet? I'm like, no, I cannot rent to you. And they're like, why? We don't understand. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't understand. I bought this commercial building. It's CMU2 zoned, and I can't run it commercially. So I have these tenants sitting there, 2 tenants that are living the life of Riley, loving the beach, and everyone else, hundreds of people that used to stay there, that cannot come and enjoy the beach. One of 12 most beautiful beaches in the entire world. We have to be open for business. We have to. We are going to die. Look at that map, how large and how much gray is there. And I don't care what you do with the rest of the gray, but that whole beachfront, we are Crystal Beach, Fort Erie, we are the water, and I tell everyone, from Lake Erie to Lake Ontario and the Niagara River, come stay. And I live in Niagara on the Lake, and I have property here, and my thing is the water. And we are all blessed to have the 5 Great Lakes, and we should really pay attention to that.
I promise to be really, really quick. Okay, I'll be real quick. We'll pass it on. I'm Laura Cormus, and I own 2 businesses here with my honey Dave. We came into Crystal Beach about 9-10 years ago, and it was to build a community. And we're not the only ones. There's been a lot of people that have put the heart and soul into building the community. I think Crystal Beach, if you could decide, city-wise, are we a tourist town or not? Because it always has been. We all think it is. And if it's not, then we all need to make different business decisions, right? We don't have short-term rentals, but short-term rentals help businesses. We've seen businesses close. It's very, very sad. It's been 2 years already with COVID and with not having Airbnb. It hurts. It hurts a lot of people. And we don't have deep pockets. I recommend, I don't think the study's over. I agree with everybody else. I think we really need to take it serious. But I think you should open it up, and it should be grandfathered in. Everybody do what you were doing before. Make the owners responsible. If they mess up, they get nailed, and it gets taken away. They're the bad guy. But you really have to let this happen. You've got to let us happen, grandfathered in, let people run their businesses, because it's going to be a slow town if we don't make the changes now. It's been 2 years. Businesses are closing. 4 years. Excuse me. It's just, it can't. We're going to die. Everything we've been building for the last 10 years, it's going down the tubes. All the new stuff that's built, there's nobody going to come. Nobody's going to come. We're ruining what we've been doing. We're ruining it all. Open it up for a while. Take all the time you want. We're not going to bother you. Take all the time you want and do it right. Get all the numbers and let everybody decide. But don't stop business and people making money right now. We're going to die.
So as such, I heard from both of you that that your recommended approach came out of because historically in Crystal Beach area, cottages and short-term rentals were allowed. So why are you only considering one area's historical thing and not considering what has been happening historically all across Fort Erie? So my property is in rural Fort Erie. It is right not on the beach, but it is about 5 minutes from the beach. And historically, the previous owner had been doing Airbnb for the last 5 years. And I've also sent this in a comment and email as well. However, my comments email have totally been ignored. And like, I just don't understand why only one area's historical prominence has been considered, whereas rest all areas have just been forgotten. So I would like to understand why only one area's historical thing you took.
So in terms of historical, we were referring to Crystal Beach proper. I can appreciate that the waterfront has been used in some cases for cottages for over 100 years as well. If I had to defend it, if we open up the whole waterfront, it's difficult to draw a line as to where to stop.
Then don't. People who are making mistakes, there should be more policing. And right now, like with the use of technology, you can easily monitor the amount of noise people are making. With the help of video surveillance, you can always keep a check on the short-term rentals. And like there was nothing of like, like this study is just about like as such, out of 15,000 homes, it's only 300-400 homes in which tourists actually want to stay. And like I just don't understand why like none of this was considered.
How did you get
the
number of leases based on how many homes are here? I mean, what was the percentage?
You're talking about the 250?
Yeah.
You'll have to speak to council about that. That wasn't staff. There was a decision of council to say, let's cap this at 250. So if you have a question about that, put it in your comments, please. Send it in. We'll make sure that it gets before council. Now, we have one last speaker. Thank you, sir, for waiting. But if we can just, try and get this over with, we're already well past our time.
Yeah. So I just have one recommendation. It's for WSP. I want to know, when you guys came with this proposal that you guys have, besides council and the mayor, who else have you guys talked to actually bring this together? Are you guys residents of Fort Erie, either of you, in Crystal Beach?
No, we're not residents, no.
Is there anybody advising you that lives in Crystal Beach on this?
We've received feedback from all members of council. We've received feedback from members of the public. We have a community focus group, as well as just input that we've received in email through the project website.
Right, but I think what you guys need and what you guys need beside you as a local person that knows this area historically, that doesn't rule out waterfront, and I really believe you should have somebody on both sides. Somebody here that doesn't want short-term rentals and somebody that does. And if you have them side by side with you and they both are from Crystal Beach and they know how the city and town works, it's going to help you guys a lot, because otherwise you're going to get people up here angry and upset instead of just actually using logic. Because to me, this study that you guys have done and whatever you guys are recommending to everybody here, I don't think there's any logic to it at all. And I don't think you guys actually know what this town's about. And I think that's the problem.
Okay, well, thank you very much, sir. The community focus group did have representation of people who live here, both sides, for and against, waterfront owners and not. So listen, we're done now, so I just want to thank you all for coming. Comments, please make sure they're in by a week from now, on the 25th. Send them to me, my email address. I'll make sure they're passed immediately over to the consultants so that the consideration is given, but I'd like them for record. And then from that point forward, everything here will be posted tomorrow on Let's Talk Fort Erie as well, so you'll be able to get that information.
Chris, just a quick question. Can you summarize just from what you've heard tonight, what we can expect as citizens, knowing there's a high amount of questions and comments, and how long this will take to ferment and get through council, just to manage people's expectations?
Managing expectations. Well, listen, we'd like to hear from people in a week. We have this out here. There's the options were assessed and vetted. This is where the consultants have made their recommendations on this. We are going to hear that, everything here. I know the flavor of what's happening. This will be considered, And then the report that'll be advanced by the consultant study work is done. It'll go together with a staff administrative report to council. I don't want to commit to a date, but let's just say May. But that commitment is really hard.
There's already a date in May for council.
Sorry?
May the 28th, I think, is the date that was put out.
We would like to hit that. We would like to hit that date. You know, I can say that, but please, you know, like this study, as you know, is dragged out because the amount of interest, the amount of things that have been going on, the amount of people who've been commenting and doing all kinds of things has protracted this, along with a number of other things. You know, I can't begin to tell you those, but we're doing our best. That's all I can say. Comments, please. Thank you all. Come in. Thank you.